Hi, my name is Lindsay Wickersham, and I'm the teacher on assignment for OMSD's Teacher Induction Program. In this video, I am going to discuss the importance of assessing on the CSTP Continuum and how to go about doing so. The CSTP Continuum, the acronym is California Standards for the Teaching Profession, and it is how California teachers are evaluated. But in terms of induction, it's how candidates are going to self-assess themselves to see growth along their process in induction. I'll first start with the initial self-assessment, which is typically done in August or when you're first hired. In that booklet that I just showed right here, each candidate will get one of these booklets to keep with them throughout their 2 years in the induction program. Before we get into the task of self-assessing on the CSTP, it is really important to talk about growth mindset, because having a growth mindset is going to play a big part in reflecting and doing some self-thinking in regards to the CSTPs. As you can see on this picture, the words that are crossed out embody a fixed mindset, while the words written underneath reflect a growth mindset. We all want to strive to have a growth mindset in our lives, and we want our students to have a growth mindset as well. Now, of course, we're not all perfect and this doesn't happen, but if we can start thinking and training our brains to have a more growth mindset than a fixed mindset, will be much better. We're going to watch 58 seconds of a video that describes the difference between a growth mindset and fixed mindset.
I'm a teacher just like you. I teach 6th grade science, and if you're anything like me, you've wasted your plan time trying to find...
There are two types of mindset we can cultivate. One that embraces problems as opportunities to learn, and one that avoids them, often out of fear to fail. People that avoid conflicts can be described as having a fixed mindset. Those who see problems as interesting challenges have a growth mindset. Sometimes we like to switch from one to the other. People have a fixed mindset because they believe that basic qualities like intelligence or talents are fixed traits, and that these traits are responsible for success. They often like to document past achievements. With a growth mindset, people believe that new abilities can be developed through practice. This view creates the love for learning that most great leaders and artists have in common. For them, life becomes an exciting journey with endless opportunity to figure out new things and advance.
As the speaker shared in that video, we do often switch between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset, just depending on the circumstance or what's in front of us, what we're faced with. But for the sake of this process of self-assessing on the CSTPs, please try to have a growth mindset. Take a look at this picture, this poster. I'll give you about 10 seconds to look it over. So here you see some values that solidify this understanding of how to develop a growth mindset. One of the things I like about this visual a lot is this part right here. We have to own our own attitude. Many times your principals, your administrators will tell their teachers that the very best teachers are those who are willing to grow and who welcome feedback, because they know that that teacher is willing to change, is open, is willing to try and fail and try something else. That is the epitome of a growth mindset and what differentiates a good teacher from a great one, no matter if you're in year 1 or year 15. All right, so let's get into self-assessing on the CSTP continuum. Let me give you some rationale as to why we do this. So what is the purpose? As we develop as professionals, it is necessary to self-assess on the CSTP. Throughout your time in induction, with the guidance of your mentor, you will be self-assessing yourself 3 times per year on this continuum. As professionals, we need to be aware of our strengths and weaknesses so we can continue to refine our practices and grow. So to begin this, we're going to we want an overall global perspective, thinking about where we are right now in the current year, teaching the current grade or subject area, using the current materials and strategies with the children, the students who are sitting in front of us, which we know that every student and class varies. Remember, we don't know what we don't know, and we are in the beginning of the year, regardless if this is year 1 or year 5. By doing this task, you will have a better understanding of what some of your ILP goals might be, paired along with observation and your triad meeting that you will engage in with your administrator and mentor. So although it seems like a lot to assess on all of them, it's needed to kind of get that overall view of where we might need to, what we might need to work on. How do I know where to place myself? Well, if you're a first or second year teacher, it's highly likely you will place yourself in the first 2 columns. So if you look in your continuum, that's emerging or exploring. Remember that with only a couple years of experience, there's no way for you to know it all. This is something we learn with experience and years of practice. For those of you who have been teaching several years, does that mean you know it all, or have it all, or are doing it all, or you've just maxed out on the learning for that area? Think back to the growth mindset. Is that embodying a growth mindset? Probably not. We all have strengths and weaknesses, so keep that in mind. When using the continuum, it'll be super helpful because the continuum gives very descriptive details for both the teacher and the student for each of the 5 levels on the continuum. Mentors are going to track your growth on your selected CSTP elements throughout the year, and will be documenting this to help determine candidate competency to earn your clear credential. So it is your responsibility to keep this continuum during your time in the induction program. And then as the year gets going, you will be required to support your placement with evidence for those CSTP elements that you are going to work on that are tied to your ILP goals. So right now you don't need to have any evidence, but you will. All right, so here I'm going to do a think aloud and walk you through how to do the initial self-assessment on the CSTP in the beginning of the year. So you're going to start with the CSTP element. In this example, I'm using 1.4. I am going to read it using a variety of instructional strategies, resources, and technologies to meet students' diverse learning needs. So as a teacher, this is a standard that I have to follow to do. So I'm thinking about if I do that. After you read the standard, you're going to go to the first column, which is emerging, and you're going to read the teacher descriptor. Teacher uses instructional strategies, resources, and technologies as provided by the school and our district. Okay, go down to the student. Some students participate in instructional strategies using resources and technologies provided. So I'm thinking, well, I do use instructional strategies. I learned a lot in my preliminary program. I recently learned a little bit about Kagan that I've been trying to use some of those structures. Technologies, I use iReady. Excuse me. I am using the other assessments that are provided with technology. So I feel like I'm doing that. Some students participate in instructional strategy. Yes. Are all my kids? No, but I do know I have kids that are participating using the resources and technologies provided, almost all of them in that case. So I'm going to go next door to exploring, and I'm going to read here to see maybe if I'm not an emerging, I'm exploring. I'm going to read the descriptors. Explores additional instructional strategies, resources, and technologies in single lessons or sequence of lessons to meet students' learning needs. Okay. Students participate in single lessons or sequence of lessons related to their interests and experiences. Well, up here, I have explored additional instructional strategies. Right here, I'm not thinking that my students are participating in these lessons based on their interests and experiences fully. I'm still getting to know my kids. It's the beginning of the year, so I don't think I can mark myself in exploring. Now, when I'm going through these, I'm thinking, do I have any evidence when I'm thinking about these descriptors for both teacher and student? You don't have to list any, but it's good to have them in the back of your head. So at this point, I'm in the emerging column. So I know that because you're going to date it with the date in which you self-assess. So although I do have pieces in exploring, I can't fully say that I'm exploring because I'm not meeting the student descriptor down here. I'm only meeting the teacher descriptor. So therefore I'm at emerging. If you would like to place some evidence down here, you most certainly can. You will be required in December, mid-year, and at the end of the year, but right now you don't need evidence. Okay. At this point in the video, I'm going to be going through the mid-year self-assessment, which typically takes place in December. This is after you have created your ILP goals in the fall and you have done one inquiry cycle based on one of your ILP goals. And remember that in your ILP, you have identified the CSTP elements that support that goal. So what you're going to do is you're going to identify those CSTP elements that you've worked on according to your ILP. So in this case, you've worked on one ILP goal, and you probably have between 3 and 4 CSTP elements listed right next to that. You're going to read the criteria for each placement for both the teacher and student. So do you meet those descriptors as a teacher? Do your students meet those descriptors that's listed there in the continuum? And do you have at least 1 to 2 pieces of evidence to support your placement? If you are meeting both descriptors and you have evidence, you can appropriately place yourself for those chosen CSTP elements. This is a good time to get feedback and talk it out with your mentor if you're unsure and you want their guidance and ideas of maybe some things they've seen in your class. So I am going to use element 1.4 again as a model here. Back in August, I placed myself in emerging because I went through the columns and I felt that I am emerging. I talked it out. I can't meet all of the ones in exploring. So I'm going to read it again just to make sure. So I'm going to read emerging, the teacher descriptors, and the student descriptors. I'm going to go next door and read it in exploring. I read exploring for teacher and I read exploring for student. At this point, I can confidently and with evidence say that I am in the exploring level in December or mid-year mark. Now remember, I need some evidence. So I have established team leaders to support their peers in math based on iReady data. That's something that I use in math. And I create interactive lessons on Google Slides using Eureka curriculum. So those are 2 pieces of evidence that help support my placement here. And with the interactive Google Slides, I'm trying to base it on things that are popular with the kids or little emojis to make it based on their interests and experiences. Let's take another look at this example. This example, I'm going to use element 3.6, which is addressing the needs of English learners and students with special needs to provide equitable access to the content. So in the initial reflection back in August, I put that I am in emerging column because if I read the descriptor, and as you can see here, there's no teacher and student descriptor, it's just a blank descriptor. So overall it's for teacher. So as the teacher, I'm aware of students' primary language and English language proficiency based on available assessment data. And I provide adapted materials to help English learners access content. So yes, I'm following the OMSD adopted ELD program, and I know their assessment data based on the results that came with my student file. So in August, I'm confident that I'm here. Now, I placed myself here in, I'm gonna go back for a second. So mid-year, I'm gonna read exploring now. Seek additional information describing elements of culture and language proficiencies in listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Uses multiple measures for assessing English learners' performance to identify gaps in English language development. And I attempt to scaffold content using visuals, models, and graphic organizers. There's some things that stick out to me that I do in exploring. I use graphic organizers with all my students, so English language learners are all part of all my students, my entire class. I try to use visuals as much as possible. I struggle with that a little bit in math. And use multiple measures for assessing and identifying gaps. I have not done that yet. So I am not here with everything. So therefore, I'm going to place myself still in emerging. So is it okay that I do not show growth from beginning to mid-year? Yes, because although I am growing in some ways, I cannot meet this criteria for exploring, so I'm leaving myself in emerging. It is okay. Do not feel like you have to grow from one column to the next in 1 year. Remember, this is the continuum for the teaching profession, not just a year or your time in induction. Remember, we need to include evidence here. So what is the evidence that I have to support my placement in emerging? I attended an IEP meeting on 9/18 that was for one of my English language learners. I went to an elevation training back in August to learn about this program, the needs of my students, and how to find data. And then I met with my outreach consultant, or ORC, to get support for my one newcomer. So there are some things I'm doing to support and address the needs of my English learners, but I'm still at emerging. That is okay. At this time in the video, I will be going over the end of the year self-assessment on the CSTP Continuum of Teaching Practice. At the end of the year, you're going to identify all of the CSTP elements that are on your ILP, so both inquiry cycles. You're going to read the criteria for each. Do you meet the descriptors? And do you have at least 3 pieces of evidence to support this placement? With the approval and support of your mentor, you're going to appropriately place yourself for those chosen CSTP elements. So I'm going to go back and use the sample of 1.4. Back in August, I placed myself in emerging. In December, I placed myself in exploring. I have 2 pieces of data here. I'm going to read applying to see if I qualify for applying. So the big difference is I see explores, and this one says utilizes. The verbs, the action words are a bit different from column to column. It says utilizes a variety of strategies, including culturally responsive pedagogy, resources, and technologies during ongoing instruction to meet students' diverse learning needs. So I'm thinking, do I use a variety of strategies? Yes. Do I use culturally responsive pedagogy? I sure try. I know I've been calling a lot of hands up lately, and that's really not the best way to get student input. A variety of different strategies with technology. I wouldn't say I'm very strong on that. Let me read this part. Students participate in instruction using strategies, resources, and technologies matched to their learning needs. That part, I still have a lot of work to do. I have not even come close to mastering differentiation or giving each student what they need when it comes to this CSTP element. So really, I'm not in applying, I'm still in exploring. However, there are some more things that I've done and I've learned, and I can add to my evidence. I've utilized Rally Coach at least 1 time per week in math. That's a Kagan structure that I've really hammered in on with my kids, and it's really beneficial. And I pull small groups 3 times per week to support any struggling learner in my class, not just my ELs or my students with IEPs. It's any student who's struggling with that concept in math. That's what I'm pulling. So I have 4 pieces of evidence that support my placement in exploring. And when I sit back and look, I have made a lot of growth in this standard from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, even if I'm still exploring, because I am still exploring the standard. I have a lot of work to do. I'm not at the applying phase yet, and that's okay. I've still grown in this element. I hope that this reflection video on the CSTP Continuum has been helpful. Please reach out to me. My information is down here in the orange box should you have any follow-up questions or need more clarification. Thank you.